Hi, this is Sung, the Principal and Director of Sky Academy, and in this episode what we're going to be looking at is extending our knowledge of geometric applications of calculus a little bit further and looking at the terminology involved with doing that, called local or global maximum or minimum points. Okay, so Sigmund Freud was once very famous for saying sometimes a cigar just isn't a cigar. Alright, but we're going to apply this in maths because sometimes a maximum just isn't a maximum, and sometimes a minimum just isn't a minimum. Okay, so I'll tell you what I mean by all of that. For a restricted domain of a curve, y equals f of x. So in other words, a restricted domain means if we're going to restrict a curve within a certain bandwidth, alright, and you can then examine the graph in terms of global or absolute maximum minimum and local or relative maximum minimum. So global maximum minimum is the same word as an absolute maximum minimum, and local maximum minimum is the same word as relative maximum minimum. They mean the same thing. And basically the difference is this. A global maximum minimum is where the curve ultimately hits its highest point, or its lowest point if it's a minimum, okay? For the entire bandwidth, for the entire domain. So in other words, just because a curve is at its highest point at one particular part of the curve doesn't mean it's going to be the ultimate maximum minimum, because the curve may then turn back on itself again and go even higher, in which case that's where the new maximum would be. Okay, so that's what a global maximum or minimum point is. It's the highest or the lowest point of the curve. A local maximum minimum is where the point on the graph turns in on itself just like a maximum or minimum point should. Okay, just like a maximum minimum point that we've examined up until now has been doing up until now. Okay, so let me demonstrate this by way of example for you. So I've got a graph that I've prepared a little bit earlier, but I'll let you look at that for a little bit. You can press pause and copy that down if you want to, but I'll leave that up there for a little bit, okay? And then I will show you this curve, all right? And we're going to examine this, and I'll do that with a red pen. So, this particular curve has a bandwidth or a domain that goes from -5 to +6. So the domain of the function, we call that the domain, is from -5 to +6. Okay, and so the graph kind of takes this form here. Okay, now you can see that there is a maximum point there and there's a minimum point there. Alright, but the highest point in the curve is not at the maximum, it's at this point here. So that point there is what we call the global max, with this point here, and I'll write it properly so that you can read it, is called the local max, right? Or another word that you can use is the relative maximum. This point here is called your local minimum, and that's because this point here is your global minimum. Now, is it possible for a local max, if you have a series of local maxes in a curve, maybe one or two local maximums in a curve, is it possible for one of those local maximums to be the global maximum? The answer is of course it is. Alright, so wherever the highest point in the curve is will be your global max. In this case it's over here. And wherever your lowest point is will be your global min. Okay, and vice versa. And then every other turning point is going to be a local maximum or minimum in between. I hope that makes that clear, because this sort of question will come up a lot, and basically the question will be, tell me where, on this curve for this domain, where is the global or absolute maximum or minimum, and find any other local maximum minimum points as well. Okay, so just be familiar with that and be aware of the terminology, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.